We're going to be in Esther chapter 5 and 6. We're going to be in both of those chapters. And really, last week we saw the climax of the story, and now everything starts to go downhill, and we're going to see some things unfold. But while you're getting to Esther chapter 6, anybody ever had good intentions but ended up doing something bad, right? Or maybe messed up the job a little bit? Now, I found some funny notes that children have written that good intentions, writing a thank you card or a thank you note, but what they say is kind of mean or a little bit. So how about this first one? Thank you for the graduation gift. Thanks for dating my dad. I really didn't think anyone else would date him. Like, seriously, thank you. We cannot express our gratitude enough. How about this one? Thank you, God, for the little brother, but I asked for a puppy. Dear Grandma, Grandpa, thanks for what you got me. Love you very much. P.S. I forgot what you got me. Thank you for the amazing skirt gun. I will shoot you with it. Thank you, Mom, for being wonderful and caring and for not making your meatloaf anymore. That's my favorite one. I do not like meatloaf. I have another one. Thank you, Emily, for my thing, whatever that thing was. Thanks for it. Now, those are good intentions, but they don't always end up good. You know what I mean? You intend something good, and sometimes things go bad. And then anybody knows somebody, because surely you wouldn't do this, know somebody who intended bad and then ended up something good happening? That's what we get to talk about today. We get to talk about the intentions of somebody and how the results are not the same as the initial intentions. Now, here's what we hear in Scripture. Our intentions are important, okay? Whether or not, because we like to, at least I like to separate my intentions from the end result. Well, I meant well, right? Or it's the thought that counts. Or we like to separate those and say, as long as you have good intentions, you're good. But really, in Scripture, what we see is you have intentions and you have results, and they are right there next to each other. Where both of them, and when we look at other people, we only look at the results, but when we look at ourselves, we only look at the intentions. But God, when He's going to look at us, He's going to look at both of them in unison, whether or not you have good or bad intentions, and whether or not you have good or bad results. Now, here's where we get this. In Matthew chapter 5, I'm not going to read this full section because I hope you've heard this. The Sermon on the Mount, he's talking about, hey, you've heard that, don't kill anybody, but I'm going to tell you, even if you think in your mind for a moment, I wish that guy was dead, you've done the same thing. The intentions, the mindset is equal to the action. And then a little bit later, he does the same thing with lust. If you look at a woman, if you do something, and we've heard, if you do something outside of your marital relationship, then that is considered adultery. But now I'm telling you, even if you look at a woman, he takes the action and equates it to the intentions. He equates it to the mindset, where our intentions are just as important. We have to have good intentions and good results. That's what God desires. And we see hints of this in the Old Testament, because right there, Jesus, He's talking about Old Testament laws, right? Thou shalt not commit adultery. That's in the Ten Commandments, right? That's a good one. But it's all in action. But we see hints of the intentions creeping in throughout the Old Testament. Here's an example in Psalm 44:21. Would God not discover this? The all-knowing God, would He not discover this? For He knows the secrets of the heart. He knows your hearts. He knows our intentions. So, what are your intentions? And this is what fathers are going to ask the date, the guy in the big jacked up truck, the diesel that you don't like. You're going to come rolling up to the front door. What are your intentions with my daughter, before you kick him in the rear and get him out of here, right? Anybody ever had to ask that before? You don't have to raise your hand. But what are your intentions? What are you planning to do? What are your goals? What do you want to happen here? And now with the story today, again, last week was the climax, and now we're on the downhill slope, and we're going to see man's intentions, which is in this story going to be the character of Haman. Haman represents all of humanity. Remember, he's the antagonist, the bad guy. And what that means is, you and I, when we're looking in the story trying to find who we are, more than likely we're Haman. Okay, we follow along? More than likely, you and I are the bad guy. And then we're going to look at what God's intentions are. Because here's a funny thing about God. He likes to take our intentions and what we want to do and twist it around and do something else. Okay? So we're going to look at what man's intentions are, represented in Haman. And then we're going to look at God's intentions, represented through we'll look at what happens with Xerxes. He's kind of, even though he's not a good guy, he is used by God, even though God's not mentioned, to intend something different than what man intends. And so here we go. Let's get started. First of all, we're going to see man intends malice. Man intends malice. Malice means bad things, mean things, hateful things, evil things. Man intends malice. Now, do you remember a couple weeks ago we talked about being marked? And the three things that we are marked by are tragedy, are mistakes, and then sin. And how Haman is most marked by sin. He's corrupt, he's ruined, and he is awful. And I like to use the term rotten, if you guys have noticed before. And the really fancy term for this is there is iniquity. Anybody? Iniquity. Okay, so here's Romans chapter 3:23. Have you heard this verse before? For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, right? And what happens is that sin, all have sinned, all have sinned. Everybody, you and I, we have sinned. We're Haman. We have sinned and we have fallen short, and then we get corrupted, okay? We get twisted, right? If we're not going down the right path, we're sinning and we get twisted around, we get corrupted, we get thwarted, and we have iniquity is what the Bible calls it. Iniquity, this inner corruption, this rottenness, where things are not the way they should be. And what happens is iniquity, rottenness, corruption breeds more rottenness, corruption, iniquity. It keeps breeding on and on and on and on. And what we're going to see is Haman, who is already a corrupt, evil, rotten dude, a malicious guy, he is going to intend more and more evil, more and more corruption on other people. And so here it is, chapter 5, verse 9. And if you remember last week, Esther, she's going to go try and save her people, try and save the Jewish people. And so she invites the king, Xerxes, and Haman, the only two guys, to her feast. So it's three guys dining, three people dining. And then the king says, hey, what would you like? And she says, come to my feast tomorrow. And now chapter 5, verse 9, all the way to chapter 6, verse 13, is taking place in between those two feasts. So you have about a 12-hour period where all of this is taking place. And now here's this. Esther chapter 5, verse 9. Haman went out that day, joyful, glad of heart. Okay, so right off the bat, he is happy. He is ecstatic. He is joyful. Why? Because he just got done with dinner with the king and his wife. If you, whether or not you like the president or any other president, if you go to dinner with the president of the United States and his wife, and you are the only three there, that's kind of a big deal. Everybody agree? That's kind of a big deal. So Haman's pretty happy, pretty ecstatic. It's just me, the king, and his wife. I'm in elite company. I'm happy. I'm around power. I'm around influence. I like this. So he's happy. He's joyful. But when Haman saw Mordecai, remember our good guy, Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he neither rose nor trembled before him. He was filled with wrath against Mordecai. And if you remember a couple weeks ago, Mordecai not bowing down, it's just a mistake. Because it's not a sin to bow down. It's probably a good idea to bow down so that, 15 million Jews don't get sentenced to death. But then Mordecai doesn't bow down again and again and again. Every single day, he's just relaxing, lounging, not giving any honor, not giving any respect. And Haman gets ticked off. All right? Haman gets really, really mad. And now, the first time he saw this, he gets so mad that he says, I don't want to kill just him. I want to kill all of them. So he swindles his way, gets this bill passed where it's going to kill all the Jews. And now, what does it say? He sees him again, and he is filled with wrath against Mordecai. Filled with wrath. And anybody else having a good day, and everything's going well, and then you see that one person, and the rest of your day's ruined? Right? Just me? Am I the only one? You see that one guy and the rest of the day is just off. All right, how about this? Anybody's Wi-Fi internet connection gone out of your house and you just were mad the rest of the day? Just me again? I'm talking to myself the whole day again. It's going to be a fun sermon if I'm just talking to myself. So one little tiny insignificant event, that's not a big deal. I mean, one guy, one action, I can get over that. But it ticks him off so much that he just throws the rest of the day off. Even if he was happy before, he's not happy anymore. And he's just thrown off for the rest of the day, filled with wrath. And now he's pushed to the point where he wants to take action. Verse 10. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself. He said, oh man, I just want to go thump him, right? Anybody else want to just thump a kid, thump somebody every now and then? He said, I just want to go thump him. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, and he sent and brought his friends and his wife Zeresh. Now, I went to camp last week, okay? 5th and 6th graders, which are like 10 and 11-year-old kids. If you spend a week around 10 and 11-year-old kids, you want to thump them, okay? Now, there's one in particular kid who got on my nerves all week. Now, he was not the worst kid I've ever met, but he really got on my nerves. And one day, we were in the big building where there's no chairs, so all the kids are sitting on the floor trying to partake in this worship service. And then the guy's preaching, and there's this one kid who's just rolling around like a beached whale, doing blah, 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 just being a punk, okay? And Bob Beckman preaches over in Grayville. You guys may have met him when he came for the Ash Wednesday service. Bob Beckman said, hey, be quiet, sit still, you're going to be good. And then turns around, and I look over, and I see this kid go, It's like, I had to restrain myself from killing the child, okay? You hear me? If you do not, and I had 2 or 3 conversations with him that week, had to restrain myself. I am not allowed to hit the children, okay? Unless the parent gives me permission, not allowed to hit them. I don't know the kids' parents. Had to restrain myself. That is what Haman has to do. I have to restrain myself. Okay, you guys want one more church camp story before I go on? Okay, so there's this one kid, again, in that same evening, there's this kid who comes scooting around the outside. On his bottom, just scooting back. What is this guy doing? And he's wearing a Flash t-shirt, the superhero Flash. Hey, Flash, what are you doing? He just looks at me and then scoots on farther. Oh, Lord help me. And he scoots all the way around all of the people, up next to the stage, and he starts looking underneath the stage going, I wonder if I can get under there. And then thankfully, Jayla got up and said, get out of there. Had to restrain ourselves, okay? Sometimes we have to restrain ourselves. That's Haman. He is so off, so messed up, so angry, so corrupt. He has to restrain himself because one guy doesn't show him the kind of respect that he wants. He has to restrain himself. Haman's hate for Mordecai, it's all born out of pride. Where I have to restrain myself because the kid, it's not my pride. Haman, all he cares about is building himself up and putting everybody else down. And so whenever he doesn't get what he wants, he takes it out on other people. The prideful and hateful breeding ground is where the intentions turn malicious. The intentions turn to malice. And he starts to plan evil. He starts to think, what can I do? And he's already evil because he's intended to kill all the Jews, but now he just wants to speed it up a little bit. Look at verses 11 and 12. Invites the friends, invites his wife, hey, what's your advice for me? Which, on a side note, is against the law according to chapter 1, because the law says the man should be the leader in the house and all the women listen to him. And he says, hey, wife, what should I do? Just a side note on Haman. But verse 11 and 12 now. And Haman recounted to them, listen to just how prideful he is and how much I do not like this guy, okay? And how much I don't like him because he's like me, all right? And Haman recounted to them the splendor of his riches. Look at how wealthy I am. Look at all of my money. The splendor of his riches. The number of my sons. I've got a big family. They're all faithful to me. They're all working for me. I got a great family business. Everything's going well. The splendor of his riches, the number of his sons, all the promotions with which the king had honored him, and how he had advanced them above the officials and the servants of the king. I am number 2 in all the kingdom. I am vice president of all of Persia, the empire of Persia. I'm the number 2 guy. If you want to talk to the king, you have to talk to me first. I'm number 2 guy, only behind the king himself. And then Haman said, even Queen Esther, let no one but me come with the king to a feast that she prepared. I am so high in demand that I get to go dine with the king and his wife, the 3 of us alone, and it's a normal event. I get to go again. No one but me come with the king to feast that she prepared, and tomorrow also I'm invited by her together with the king. I get to go again. It's going to be a good time. This is what I want. Everything's going well, but, verse 13, yet all of this is worth nothing. Even though I have 20 things going great for me, one tiny little thing messes everything up, throws the rest of my day off, ticks me off so much that I can't focus on anything else. All this is worth nothing to me so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. And that Mordecai the Jew, you can just You can just feel the layer of poison that he wants to put on those words. Just, I hate this guy. Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Awful. I hate this guy. And again, this is the first world problems. Everything's going well, but one little tiny thing messes up and ruins our day. So here are his intentions. Promote myself, put everybody else down. Promote myself, put everybody else down. And he's pure malice. Now here's the suggestion that he's really going to like from his wife and his friends. Verse 14, then his wife Zeresh, all his friends, said to him, let a gallows or let a spike 50 cubits high be made. And by the way, 50 cubits high, it's 75 feet. 75 feet high be made. And in the morning, tell the king to have Mordecai hanged upon it. Then go joyfully with the king to the feast. This idea pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made. All right, do you guys know what the tallest building in Albion is? I tried to look it up and find actual statistical facts on the tallest building, but I'm going to tell you what I think it is. The Golden Arches over there. I think that is the tallest thing that you can see in Albion, right? Now, what Haman wants to do, or what their suggestion to Haman is, make the Golden Arches, hang a noose from it, and put Mordecai on that. Or basically a big stick, the precursor to a cross and crucifixion. Stick him on it, 75 feet in the air. Everybody will look at that and go, Haman's not messing around when he's talking about killing the Jews. He's actually going to do this. And that's what their suggestion is. And it is pure evil, corruption, and just awful. And really, Haman and all his friends act like junior high kids, right? You know, the popular kid, he builds himself up. Look how cool I am. Look at how amazing I am. And then one kid calls him dumb. And then he says, well, I'm just going to beat up that kid now to make myself feel better. Put him down, build me up. And that's the malice of Haman. He's just awful and corrupt. Now let's fast forward a little bit into chapter 6 where he actually goes and talks to the king. Now it's the next morning after he's already had the gallows made. And chapter 6, verse 4. The king said, hey, who is in the court? And Haman had just entered the court. Why? Of the king's palace to speak to the king about having Mordecai hanged on the gallows that he had prepared for him. He has just made them, and now he's heading to the king. Hey, king, give me permission to go kill this guy early. Let me go kill him now. And now, verse 5. And the king's young men told him, Haman is there, standing in the court. And the king said, let him come in. Let him come in. Where I lost myself, sorry. And so let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said to him, what should be done to the man whom the king delights to honor? And Haman said to himself, whom would the king like to delight to honor more than me? So his intentions are to go in, get Mordecai killed, and then he gets interrupted. Before he can even start talking, before he can say, hey, king, can I go kill this guy Mordecai? The king says, hey, what would the person who I delight in, what do you think is a good idea to give them? What can I do for the guy that I like to honor? And what's Haman's thoughts? Well, that's got to be me. That has got to be me. Now, think of it like this. Husbands, imagine you come home and it is February 10th, and you ask your wife, honey, what would a wife like for Valentine's Day? Okay? That's what we're hearing, right? What would a wife like for Valentine's Day? The obvious answer is, flowers, chocolate, all that. But the obvious recipient of that is the wife, right? Now imagine if we'll get to what happens in a little bit, but imagine just for a second if you gave it to somebody else. You get thwarted, I get thumped, I get kicked, I get swatted. I would no longer be alive, probably, all right? So Haman, he's thinking, obviously it's got to be me. Obviously, the king wants to honor me. Nobody else is around. It has to be me. Who else would the king want to honor than me? I'm the best. I'm number 2. I've got all this money. I've got all these kids. I've got the best job. The king loves me. Nobody else can even compare. So here's what he suggests, verses 7, 8, and 9. And it says, and Haman said to the king, for the man to whom the king delights to honor, let royal robes be brought, which the king has worn, and the horse that the king has ridden, and on whose head a royal crown is set. And let the robes and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials, and let them dress the man whom the king delights to honor, and let them lead him on the horse through the square of the city, proclaiming before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. So here's what it suggests. Give the man royal robes. The robes that the king has worn. Okay, Anybody watch television? Anybody watch the television show Friends? Okay? In this television show Friends, there's an episode where they're getting ready to go to a wedding, and so they rent tuxedos. The guys rent tuxedos, and they find out that the tuxedos they're renting have been worn by famous people, by Val Kilmer, Batman, by the way, if you're curious who Val Kilmer is, have been worn by a famous person. And then another one rents the tuxedo because he's jealous of Val Kilmer's tux. He rents a tuxedo that has been worn by one of the guys who plays James Bond. I can't remember which one. But they want to wear the robe, wear the clothes, wear the tuxedo of somebody famous. Anybody think that'd be neat to just put on the suit jacket of some famous guy for a minute? Just to say, hey, I've worn that guy's suit? That's pretty neat. And that's his suggestion. Haman's idea is, well, it'd be neat. Because for him, the next step in glory, the next step in pride, the next step in honor is royalty. Because he's just there. He's not quite royalty. He's just one step beneath royalty. Let me pretend to be royalty for a day. And then he says, well, let the king's horse be brought out that the king has ridden, and let this man ride it. Now, this would be like if the President of the United States said, Clayton Richison, you'd like to fly to Florida? You can use Air Force One for the day. Yeah, take it. Why not? No big deal. It's my personal airplane, but you use it for the day. You're fine by doing that. And he says, put this royal crown on his head, this sign, this symbol of royalty, this symbol of power, this symbol of authority. Go ahead and do that. And then lead a parade. Have a big parade for the guy. Lead him down saying, hey, this is the guy that the king likes. Hey, this is the guy that the king likes. Have a big parade. Throw candy to the little kids. Say, hey, this is what's going to happen if you delight in the king. This is Haman's suggestion. All it is build myself up and put everybody else down. It's pride, it's evil, it's corruption, and it's malice. His intentions through and through are nothing but evil, just like you and I. You remember what God said back in Genesis? The intentions and the minds of all of mankind are evil and wicked forever. Something along those lines. The forever might be added by me. But here's the deal. We still experience that. We are still wicked, corrupt, evil, and malicious. So man intends malice. But here is what God intends. God, He intends glory. Now, rather than taking what is intended for something that He takes the intentions of man, which are for malice, and He takes those and uses it for glory. You follow along? He takes the thing that you intend to be used for evil, and He likes to do this thing where He takes it and humbles you with that and uses it for His glory instead. Now, I hope you've picked up on the fact that God is not mentioned in this Bible, in this book, I mean. In the book of Esther, God's name, Yahweh, does not appear in this book of the Bible. And yet we can see God not on the pages, but between the lines and behind the scenes. Now, the illustration I heard was, you look outside and you can see the trees bending. You can see the leaves flying across the ground. That is not because you can see the wind, but you can see the effects of the wind, right? We do not see God, but we see the effects of God in this story. And His effects are taking what man intends for malice and using it for His own glory. He takes what man intends for malice and uses it for His own glory. That is what God's MO is. That is His actions in this story. And what He's going to do, rather than using crazy miracles, rather than using a burning bush, rather than parting the Red Sea, rather than healing a lame man, rather than bringing a guy back to life, rather than removing sickness, He's going to take a mundane event and another mundane event and another mundane event and another mundane event, link them together, and work them for His good. He's going to take these things that we think are insignificant, don't matter, run-of-the-mill, mundane, nobody cares about that, and He's going to link them all together and change world history. All right, so here it is. Look at verses 1. Let's just look at verse 1 to start, because this is the first mundane event that God starts to link together with other things. And on that night, the king could not sleep, and he gave orders to bring the book of memorable deeds, the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. Now, anybody else just not been able to sleep before, right? You get too stressed out, or maybe you're so tired that you can't sleep. Has that ever happened to anybody? Or sometimes you just stay up all night. Your mind keeps going. The body's ready to rest, but the mind is just whirring away, and so you just can't quite shut it down. Now, the king, he starts to thinking, gets a little worried. He's king of the biggest empire in the world. He's probably a little stressed out, I can assume. And he, for one reason or another, he's up all night. He's just up. He's awake, and he cannot get to sleep. And this is something that God starts to link together with other things. Now, it's whenever the king can't sleep, he says, bring in the record deeds, bring in the book, and not just read it off to me. It's kind of like us turning on the TV and watching infomercials until 3 in the morning, right? And by the way, I do not need the Miracle Blade 3 or the ShamWow, but I have seen all of the infomercials plenty of times, right? The king, he brings in the Chronicles, says, read them off to me. Read them off. We don't know if the king is trying to bore himself into sleep or if he really finds it entertaining. We don't really know, but the king just can't sleep, and so he finds some entertainment through reading these books. And then here's the next mundane event, verse 2. And it was found, written, how Mordecai had told about Bigthana and Teresh, 2 of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold and who had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus or King Xerxes. So another mundane event is that they happened to pick, just a random coincidence, they happened to pick this right book, put up to the right page and start reading at the right part on that page to talk about Mordecai, what we saw a few chapters ago. This is something that's 5 years in the past, right? It's something that's a long time ago. It just happens. It's just a freak coincidence. But here's the deal. What can seem like a coincidence to us, God can use for providence. That's not 100% of the time, but some of the time. And what we see here is that a coincidence is being used for God's providence instead. Now, can I tell you the story about one of my favorite coincidences in history? Okay, so anybody a World War I buff? Not World War II, World War I. Now, World War I got kicked off by Franz Ferdinand being assassinated on one of his visits, right? And Franz Ferdinand, he's the Archduke, and he's visiting, and there's like 6 or 7 guys that plan an assassination attempt on Franz Ferdinand because they don't like him. There's visiting on a certain day. It's a national holiday. They don't like it. This, and this. They really don't like the guy, and so they plan to kill him. And so he's riding down the street on a planned parade, on a planned march through the city, and he's riding in a convertible. And one guy takes a primitive, a precursor to the modern grenade, and throws it at the car, but it rolls off the back, and it's got a longer fuse, and so it blows up on the car behind him. And so they scurry off, and they get away, and all of the assassins, they disperse. They run away because they don't want to be found out. And then it turns out that Franz Ferdinand, he goes to the courthouse, talking to the people, doing this stuff, and then he decides, hey, I'm going to go to the hospital, check on those guys who got hurt. And so he goes by this certain route, but his chauffeur doesn't quite know the layout of the land, doesn't know the city that well, makes a wrong turn, and goes down a street that has a little bakery, a little sandwich shop on there. And there's a guy there who's eating a sandwich who happens to be one of the assassins who failed to assassinate him 6 hours earlier. And now all of a sudden he's eating a sandwich, finds the guy he's supposed to assassinate, pulls out a gun and shoots Franz Ferdinand's wife and shoots Franz Ferdinand and kills them both. A freak coincidence that spurred World War I and caused this huge, long battle, right? And that is a crazy coincidence. Now, there's things like that line up, this thing, that line up coincidences that seem insignificant, but God uses for providence. Now, that's not to say that God caused World War I. I have no idea. I'm not the authority on that. But what I can say is that God, I think, is behind the scenes and working with this sleepless night and with choosing this certain book. Now, let's look at the next seemingly mundane event, and it's a lack of a reward for Mordecai. Because remember, Mordecai saves the king, foils the assassination plot, and then nothing happens. And verse 3. The king said, "What honor or distinction has been bestowed on Mordecai for this?" The king's young men who attended him said, "Nothing has been done for him." So, hey, did we reward him? Did we give him by the way, Herodotus, who's the Greek historian, records an event where Xerxes' brother was attempted to be assassinated, and somebody foiled that attempt, and they gave him this huge reward and stuff. And now Mordecai saves the king himself and gets no reward. No reward. It's a seemingly awful thing, but I believe that God is delaying it until now for this purpose. And now we see verse 4, let's see this. And the king said, "Who is in the court?" As soon as they says, "Hey, what's going on? Did we ever reward that guy?" Haman shows up and he says, "Hey, who's in the court? Who can I get to go and reward him?" And then Haman shows up. And Haman comes along and he says, hey, what should I do to the one who delights in the king? And he gives him that whole list, the crown, horse, robe, all the things, give him a big parade. It's going to be good. And he sets up this. And what's going to follow in the next couple verses that we're going to read is the heaviest dose of irony in the Bible. Okay, you hear me? This is the funniest passage in the Bible. I want you to hear that, okay? So Haman says, hey, what can I do? You're going to honor me. It's going to be great. I'm going to kill Mordecai. You're going to honor me. Everybody's going to be happy. And can I teach you a new word? Would you guys like to hear a new word? The word is called peripety, Peripety, I believe. Peripety. It means a reversal of events. But it's not just, hey, I intend to kill Mordecai, but Mordecai doesn't get killed. Let's see what happens. We already read verses 5 through 9 where he says, hey, what should I do? Give him crown, robe, horse, parade, all that. Husband asking a wife, what should I do on Valentine's Day? And then the husband says, verse 10, and the king said to Haman, hurry, take the robes and the horse as you have said, and do so. And Haman's thinking, yeah, do so to me. That's going to be great. Yeah, do so to Haman. Say it, king, say it. Do so to Haman. Do so to Mordecai the Jew. Come again? Mordecai. Can I kill him, by the way? Can I kill that guy? Mordecai the Jew. Back in chapter 5, he says, I'm so ticked off, I want to kill Mordecai the Jew. And now, chapter 6, the king says, I want to honor Mordecai the Jew. Where Mordecai the Jew, back in chapter 5, has this malicious intent towards it, has this evil, corruption, poison, this sting to it. Now it has this blessing, this honor, this glory to God built into it. It's a complete reversal, a complete difference. Not just doesn't get killed, but instead the opposite happens. He gets honored. So Haman, let's read verse 10 now. Hurry, take the robes and the horse, as you have said, and do so to Haman. No, to Mordecai, the Jew. He sits at the king's gate. And here's the kicker. Leave out nothing that you have said. You know what he's saying right there? Haman, you are one of the king's officials. You told me that one of the king's officials should do this to the guy that I delight in. So you get to do it. Can you imagine what happens next? Haman has to dress Mordecai. Here's the robes that I should be wearing. Here's the crown that I should be wearing. Here's the horse that I should be riding. Here's the parade that I should be getting. Dripping with irony. It is the absolute awful, complete flipping around, the complete reversal of events. It's not just a simple thwarting of plans, but it returns and goes back in the other direction. In verse 11, Haman took the robes and the horse, and he dressed Mordecai. And you can just imagine the scowl on his face. Dressed Mordecai, led him through the square of the city, proclaiming before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. And maybe he's got kind of a, thus shall it be done to the one that the man delights to honor, And you imagine Mordecai kicking him and saying, hey, a little louder, please. A little more enthusiasm, please. A little bit more, please. So Haman has to do this, something that he hates and is awful for him. And now verse 12, Mordecai returned to the king's gate. After the whole parade, Mordecai goes back to work. What does Haman do? Haman hurried to his house, mourning and with his head covered. So ignore that one. I'm not going to talk about that. He covers his head. He shames himself. He's saying, I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to look at anybody. I don't want to have to deal with anybody. Covers his face, heads back home, tail between the legs, and goes home and cries a little bit. Verse 13. And Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had happened to him. And then his wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him, if Mordecai, before whom you've begun to fall, is of the Jewish people, you will not overcome him, but will surely fall before him. You will not overcome him. You will surely fall. A peripety, a complete reversal of events. And the irony where he says, I'm going to build myself up, and then he gets thwarted and brought back down. And he says, I'm going to tear that guy down, and he gets brought up and honored instead, all for God's glory. Now, what Haman intended for malice, what we intend for malice, God likes to intend for his glory. What man intends for malice, God intends for glory. So when I'm going to bring this to you, I'm just going to ask a simple question and leave it at that, because I think that's all it takes. Who have I intended malice towards? Hello? Who have we intended malice towards? Because God may want to use your intentions and use that for his glory instead, and therefore humiliate you. Now, you guys can come up and play. I think the best example. Now, I think this story represents and is echoed in the cross. Okay? Because in the cross of Jesus Christ, we have this tool, this thing, completely devised for torture, for humiliation, and for death. Okay? It's the electric chair, but worse of the day. It is hangman's noose, but worse. Okay? Nothing good about it. And what does man intend to do with that cross but malicious, malice? He kills Jesus Christ. You and I are included in that. Kill Jesus Christ. And then what God does with those intentions is He uses that cross that's intended for humiliation, torture, death, and He uses it for exaltation, life, and glory. He uses it to bring His Son out of the grave and bring salvation and honor to all these people. The story of Esther is this great irony, this drama that gets reversed in the same way that we see the cross of Jesus get reversed. It's the same story throughout Scripture where man intends malice and God intends it for glory. So what are you intending for malice?